record. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Feel free to put your name and your pronouns and where you are in the state in the chat. And we ask that anybody here who is a faith leader, if you'd be able to change your name. This is going to be for breakout rooms later. We're going to put all the faith leaders in a special breakout room with Michael, Pollock, and Leah, who are leaders of the PAPPC Faith Leaders team. So again, please put your name, pronouns in the chat. And yeah, we're in the state that you are. And if you're a faith leader, please change your name so we can put you in a breakout room later. And if anybody needs help changing your name, feel free to come off mute or just put that you need help in the chat.
Andrea, just remind me where I go. I've done it, but it's been so long.
Okay.
Participants or up?
Participants, yeah. And then you'll see your name, and then you'll click on three dots where it says more, and then you'll click rename.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Betty. And again, everyone, feel free to put your name and pronouns in the chat. Welcome. And we're going to get started in just a few minutes. We still have some people coming in from the waiting room. Thanks for joining us on this Monday night. And if you are a faith leader, we ask that you change your name because there's going to be a faith leader breakout room later. And if anyone needs help, let us know. Yeah, so glad that everyone is here. Can't believe it's already week 2. Woo! So, well, I feel like we can get started. Again, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. And it's so great to see everyone just coming in from the waiting room, and so exciting that we have over 50 folks here. And I know so many people are watching and participating in this course through the recordings and watching it on their own time. So thank you to everyone that is at home and that is watching this. We are the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, and this is our 5-week course about how we are holding power holders accountable in the Pennsylvania State Legislature. So thank you for being here. And we can go to the next slide and get started with our Mystica.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Andrea. Hi, everyone. I'm Nijmi, pronouns she or they. I'm in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, in Clearfield County. Like Andrea, I am part of the coordinating committee of the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign National Call for Moral Revival. And tonight we have a very short Mystica. Mystica is a concept that we've inherited from the landless workers movement of Brazil, the MST. It's the largest movement of the poor and dispossessed in the Western Hemisphere. And it means the spirit of the struggle. And so tonight's spirit of the struggle, to connect us to why we are in this movement, is actually a video from one of the 6 consecutive weeks of action that we were part of as the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, along with 40 other states, when we launched the campaign in 2018. We had 6 consecutive weeks of direct action at our state capitals around the country. And this was the largest continuous campaign of nonviolent civil disobedience in US history. So we're gonna just watch a very brief clip from actually the arrests that were taking place on this particular week. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nick. That was our Mishika, our spirit of the struggle for tonight. And I know that we can send that out as a follow-up so folks can check that out. I think it's part of our YouTube channel, so you can also check out PA Poor People's Campaign on YouTube. So tonight we are entering week 2 of our 5-week course. Last week, and feel free to throw up an emoji or put something in the chat if you were here last week. And if this is your first week tuning in, that's great. Welcome. We're really glad to have you. Last week, we did an introduction to the course, and we defined some key terms like political independence. And this week, we are getting into how the legislature works. So collectively, we have lots of experience. I'm sure that many of us also in the Zoom room do. And so we're really excited to share all of that tonight and to learn from each other. And so we can go ahead. Thank you so much, Nick, for doing tech tonight. The goals for tonight's class are to understand why the state legislature is an important site of struggle for the 140 million poor and dispossessed in the US today. If that's a new figure for you, I believe we also talked about this last week, that according to research done by the Poor People's Campaign, there are 140 million people in the United States today who are poor or near poor, meaning we are one emergency, one housing, one healthcare emergency away from poverty. That is nearly half of the country. Another goal is to gain clarity on how the legislature works, its structure, leadership, and how legislation moves through the legislature. Make more transparent the political economy of the legislature, so how politics and economics intersect, and to understand why statewide organizing matters and why the Poor People's Campaign organizes this way. How do those goals sound, folks?
Good.
Awesome. Okay, so why is the state legislature so important? I know that I think we're all here because we think that it is, right? And so let's start to think about and break that down, right? Why is it important? Why is it so important to think about, to study, to understand, to engage at the state level? So we have a history in this country of the concept of states' rights. You may have heard of something like that, right? You may have heard that term bandied around. And it really actually goes back to early in this country's history. And it's rooted in slavery and the conflict between Northern and Southern capital leading to the Civil War, right? And so this was part of this conflict about, as the country expanded, what states were going to be slave states, what states were going to be free states, right? And different forces of, the elite kind of used arguments about states' rights in these conflicts, right, over how to secure their profits, really. And so this is a really deep-rooted facet of our history. We're not going to do a deep study of it today, but it is important to understand how we ended up, in this place where we still have these conversations about states versus federal. Additionally, state legislatures have significant control over policies that directly impact poverty, like the minimum wage. Welfare programs are administered at the state level. There's many programs that are funded at the federal level, but administered at the state level, such as Medicaid, housing assistance, and other things. So state legislatures have lots of power in our lives. And there's also possibility, right? Through statewide organizing, we can build a broad fusion movement, and we talk about that term, and we'll talk about what that means in the Poor People's Campaign, across traditional divides like the urban-rural, racial divides, and partisan divides. So just to emphasize this a little bit more and break it down, the Poor People's Campaign is a very consciously state-based state-based movement, right? You'll always notice that when we talk about the Poor People's Campaign, we don't say, oh, the Poor People's Campaign is in Los Angeles and Chicago and Boston, right? We say the Poor People's Campaign is in California and Illinois and Massachusetts, right? States are places where social forces chart out their agendas, that should be out, and then become nationalized. And we see this, right? We see that different social forces try to introduce legislation at the state level. Thanks, perfect. And then kind of bring it into the national arena for national policy, whether that's on education, mass incarceration, and many different kinds of issues. And similarly, within the PPC, we also take on issues in our states, and then we want to sort of nationalize them, and we share things across geography, across states, right? Many of us right now are working on fighting back against Medicaid cutoffs, for example, and other issues too, right? So we also share across states, and we nationalize things that happen in the state and build them into a national movement. And we want to talk a lot also here, or a bit here, about, why do we organize statewide, right? Why is not only is the state level important, but why is it important for us to organize and build across geography at the state level? Why are we not merely a campaign that says, well, we'll be in Philly and Pittsburgh, right? So divide and conquer is the cornerstone of the ruling class's strategy. This is one of our foundational beliefs. And so therefore, a cornerstone of our strategy has to be outmaneuvering the divide and conquer of the ruling class. If we don't have a method of outmaneuvering their divide and conquer, then they will win. And they have been winning, right? They've been kicking our ass for quite a long time now. So we reject pitting urban and rural areas against each other. And, you may have seen this once or twice, right, in Pennsylvania politics. You may have seen this once or twice in the narratives that happen in the media, for example. We reject pitting urban and rural areas against each other. We reject the narrative of Pennsyltucky, if anyone's heard that kind of phrase, that kind of narrative, right? People say that, or they say, oh, Pennsylvania is Philly and Pittsburgh with Alabama in between. And I mean, I don't know about you, but that's all around. It's like, well, then what are we saying about Alabama? I mean, do we know anything actually about Alabama? Like what is the insult there, right? So there's a lot of that. We reject those narratives. Right. This sort of, Trump country idea, the pitting of working class people against each other according to party. It's another thing that we reject, because the reality is that everyday poor and dispossessed people across party lines are not the people making the decisions about our lives. And we actually, in relationship to the structures of society and the economy, we do not have the power. So other people are not the enemy. Organizing statewide gives us a more accurate picture of who is poor in our society and a more accurate reflection of the whole composition of the working class. Because if you're in any one location, you're going to have a specific picture of what things look like. So you're going to need to get a lot of input from around the whole state to understand, what does rural poverty look like? What does it look like in small towns? What does it look like in small cities? What does it look like in big cities, right? And who is comprising, right, our class, this 140 million? And we looked at a bunch of statistics also in the first session about, who's really poor, both the disproportionality and the raw numbers, which are both very, very, very important to examine. So these are some of the key reasons why we do statewide organizing, right? And we have to see that as two sides of the same coin, right? We have to understand the power structure at the state level, but we are organizing people also, right? This is critical. This is how we are political, right? Not simply by running for office or voting, but by organizing our people across the urban and rural divide, across the entire state. Oh, yeah, perfect. And I think my last piece here before I pass it to you, Andrea, is to say that along with that, right, we call into question the narrative of people voting against their own interests. And I know that I said in the session last time, right, that we're putting a lot of stuff out on the table. Some of it might be very new to you. Some of it might run counter to what you thought or what you've understood or what you've heard or what you've been taught in other spaces. And that's okay, right? We are here to agitate. We are agitators. And it doesn't mean that we're going to fight and argue about it, but it means that we're putting things out for consideration that we want to struggle with and wrestle with, right? And so we call into question the narrative of people voting against their own interests. And I have a really good video on this that's something that we can share out afterward. But I'll just say that I've done this study on this person, Rana Foroohar. She's a ruling class strategist. She's a financial writer. She's a reporter. She writes a lot of books. She tells a story about a conversation between Richard Trumka, the former head of the AFL-CIO, and officials in the Clinton administration. Trumka expressed concerns about the impact of NAFTA, right? That was the 90s North American Free Trade Agreement on US jobs. The Clinton administration shared that NAFTA would indeed hollow out entire communities for 5 generations. And it did. We've seen that, right? We've seen that the deindustrialization across this country, right? The transition from an industrial economy to a service economy, and now increasingly transition into a jobless, increasingly jobless economy. And so we need to question this kind of narrative also of people voting against their own interests. I mean, people are, struggling to figure out who does actually represent us. Where can we get the changes that we need? Where can we get our needs met? And we run into the problem that, we don't have a vehicle to do that. So that's, a bigger question, as we move forward that we do want to get into. But I'll leave it there for now and I'll pass it to you, Andrea.
Hi, everybody. Nishri, thank you so much just for grounding us and reminding us why statewide organizing is so important and just like why it's so important for us to love and organize every member of our class. And just I appreciate that part about how there's so much opportunity to continue building and to build a broad movement of the working class through statewide organizing. So thank you so much for that. I also realized I forgot to introduce myself earlier. So I'm Andrea, she, her pronouns, living in Lancaster. I'm part of the PAPPC Coordinating Committee and also part of March on Harrisburg. And I'm going to be taking us through kind of a broad overview of the state legislature. So the Pennsylvania state legislature has 203 state representatives and 50 state senators. And the Pennsylvania state legislature is full-time. And it's the third highest paid in the country. And the base starting salary for a representative or senator is over $106,000 a year. And they get an automatic pay raise every 2 years. And there's a graph on the right there. Sorry, I'm trying to squint and look in. But there's a graph on the right there, and I think it's from, I want to say 2023, I believe. And it shows how the salaries of Pennsylvania legislators compares to the pay of other jobs in the state. And I believe this is a little bit outdated because I think it says their salary, yeah, is $100,000 a year, but it's now at $106,000. And I think while we're looking at this graph, right, it's important to note that the Pennsylvania minimum wage has not been raised since 2009, right? Just want to repeat that. The Pennsylvania minimum wage has not been raised since 2009, so 16 years. But our legislators, automatically get a salary increase every 2 years. And, beyond being very well paid, legislators also get amazing benefits. They have amazing healthcare and dental benefits. They get a great pension. And they also get something called per diems. And per diems are basically these tax-free payments of, I believe it's roughly $200 per day that legislators get for each day they travel to and are in session in the state capitol. And at March in Harrisburg, we've heard that legislators will, set one foot in the House floor and go per diem, and then they walk off and go home or, go out to lunch with lobbyists. And yeah, just want to really highlight here, right? They have a very, very comfortable position, very comfortable salary, very comfortable benefits, and they're very, very well paid. But even though they are very well paid in the third highest paid legislature, and even though they are considered full-time, they don't work a lot. They work a total of about 45 to 50 session days per year. And, a big part of their job, and I put job in quotes, is fundraising. Legislators in Harrisburg spend a lot more time fundraising than they do legislating. And a great example of this is in the last week of session back in September of this past year, legislators passed only 12 bills and held 49 campaign fundraisers. Last week of session, right, in September, and they passed only 12 bills and held 49 campaign fundraisers. And that really goes to show kind of where their priorities are, and what they're using their full-time salary to do. So if you go to the next slide here, so this is two screenshots of the House and Senate calendars for this year. So these are the days that they are in session in 2025. And basically all in session means that they're in Harrisburg and they're supposed to be voting on bills. And so on the left here, we have the House session days, and on the right is the Senate's. And I included this visual here because I really wanted us to kind of get a visual of like how little they work. The House is working only 6 days in March, and the Senate is only working 4 days. Um, and you kind of might be wondering, like, why do you bring up how often they work? Why are you bringing up how much they are paid? Why is that part of tonight's class? And I think it's important for two reasons. One, we've spent a lot of time within our different member organizations as the PAPPC, right, interacting with the legislature, lobbying with them, pushing our bills. And a common excuse that we've heard from lawmakers about why they can't pass important bills is because of time. But we've learned, and we've all learned together just now, right, that they have more than enough time, right? They just choose to use it for things like fundraisers rather than actual legislating. They could put more session days on the calendar, right? Like they can do that, but they don't, right? And I include this here because we want to debunk that sort of excuse that they try to make. There is enough time. They're just using it for the wrong reasons. And two, right, their lifestyle is super out of touch in comparison to what so many of us are experiencing in our day-to-day lives, right? Like the Pennsylvania minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. People keep getting cut from Medicaid or are constantly fighting with their insurance to cover something, or their prescriptions or their surgeries or their visits, right? Most of us have to work over 40 hours a week to make ends meet, sometimes two jobs, and even that's not enough. I mean, like, it's just legislators are making $106,000 a year as a base salary, right? They get amazing healthcare benefits. They get paid $200 a day just to set foot inside a building. And on average, they only work a few days a month, right? So this is all to say, like, we are dealing with a group of people who are incredibly disconnected and out of touch from the material reality that most of us are facing, and they're paid full time to supposedly represent us full time, but they barely work and they barely pass bills. And we'll get into this later, but when they do pass bills, oftentimes they are pretty meaningless in terms of actually helping fix the material kind of crisis that working class people are in. So just want to remember this. If you hear a legislator tell you there is not enough time, show them their calendar and say, there's enough time. You just don't choose not to use it for the right things, and you choose not to put more session days on the calendar. All right, so we can move on to the next thing here. So let's quickly just talk about elections. So state representatives are elected every 2 years, and then senators, on the other hand, serve a 4-year term and are up for re-election every 4 years. A legislative session is 2 years long, and included here, the current session began back in January and it'll end in November 2026. And later in this class, Michael Pollock is going to talk about what the legislative process actually looks like. And he's also going to talk about what happens with your bills once the legislative session ends. And I won't spoil it. But we can move on to the next slide here. All right, so we're going to do a quick poll. And Nick, if you want to, awesome, great. So, okay, well, the question is, okay, good, it's up there. But I want to know who here knows who their state representatives / state senator is, and totally okay to not know or not be sure. Give people a chance to fill that poll out. Awesome. So it looks like about 75% of us do, about 10% of us don't, and about, 10% of us are unsure. I think most of us filled out the poll, but if we want to go to the next screen, next slide. So we are going to take a second to find our legislators. So we're going to put a link in the chat that takes you to a page on the state website, and it allows you to find your legislator. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna get the link and I'm going to put it in the chat. And Nick, do you want to click on the screen there, the link, and we can show it in real time? Okay. I am going to do, I will do, trying to think of something I could do, an old address I could do.
Or I can toss an old address of mine.
Okay. I was gonna say I was blanking on my old addresses. Awesome, thanks, Nick. So Nick now is showing us how, just insert your address.
Oh man, I'm trying to remember what the zip code is. That's the one thing that's going to trick me. Here, we'll see if it'll do it without a zip code. It will not.
If not, I remembered my old Pittsburgh address.
All right. Here, feel free to tell me.
So it's 226
26.
Robinson Street
Robinson Street.
and Pittsburgh. And zip is 15213. Believe. Okay, and there you go. And once you fill that out, it pulls up your House representative and your senator, and then also more information at the congressional level. So that is how you find your legislator, and the link is in the chat. And I think we can go back to the slides now. And also too, if people need help finding their legislator, we can definitely also include that in the breakout rooms too. And I think I'm going to pass it to Michael next to talk about the legislative process.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. I am Rabbi Michael Pollock, and let's talk about the legislative process. So, how a bill becomes a law. How does this work? Well, first somebody has an idea. This is the Schoolhouse Rock version, of course. First somebody has an idea. They write it down as a bill. A legislator introduces it. It can be introduced in either the House or the Senate. It doesn't matter where it goes first, but it will have to go through both chambers. And then for a bill to become a law, it has to pass 2 votes in each of those 2 chambers. So, and by chamber, I mean House or Senate. And so let's say it goes to the House first. It'll go to its committee in the House. Different bills go to different committees based off of what the subject of that bill is. So a bill that has to do with healthcare will go to the Health Committee. A bill that has to do with democracy or corruption goes to the State Government Committee, and so on and so on. And it'll get a vote out of committee. It'll go to the House floor. It'll get a vote there. It'll go to the Senate. Senate committee gets a vote. Senate floor gets a vote. If it passes all 4 of those votes, then it goes to the governor, and the governor can either sign it into law or veto it, which is the way of saying, no, we're not going to do this. So once it passes 4 votes and gets a governor's signature, then it becomes law. So the common wisdom in Harrisburg, they say, is you need 102, 26, and 1, because we have 203 state representatives. So 50% plus 1, a majority, is 102. You need 102 votes out of 203. You need 26 votes in the Senate because we have 50 state senators, and you need 1 governor's signature. 102, 26, and 1. But it's really about those 4 votes. That's the hard part. Winning the votes is actually the easy part. But getting those 4 votes in the legislature to happen is difficult because it's in the hands of very few people. And we'll come back and talk about that in a little bit. Next slide. I'm sorry, go back 1 slide. And then what happens too is that if a bill does not pass during a session, if it only passes 1 vote or 2 votes or no votes at all, it then resets the next session. So if you don't get a bill over the finish line during a 2-year session, then it resets and goes back. And we've seen this as March on Harrisburg with the gift ban before. For example, the gift ban has gotten through that first vote, the committee vote on the House side, House State Government Committee, and then it's died. Nothing has happened. We got it out of committee in 2019, and we got it out of committee again in 2021 after it reset. But if you don't pass it in a 2-year session, start all over again. And also similarly, the bill to get the adult dental benefit back into Medicaid that Put People First works on, that got through the House, died. It passed those first 2 votes and then didn't get a 3rd vote. Other bills that different poor people's campaign organizations work on have made it through a number of these votes. Some have made it all the way past the governor's desk and into law, like Vote by Mail, which March on Harrisburg worked on. Others, one more example, Debt Collective was able to pass a bill through the full House through those first 2 votes that would abolish student lunch debt, that would knock out $80 million of student lunch debt. So it's a complicated legislative process if you let the legislators make it complicated. But at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. It's 4 votes and a governor's signature. That's how a bill becomes a law.
I just want to add one thing, Michael, if I could. But just to go along with everything that Michael said, right? It's hard to get bills through the legislature, right? Because we'll talk later, but really the power resides within 4 people. And it is not uncommon for people to be working on policy fights for a long time because of this, right? Like if you look at minimum wage, people have been fighting for minimum wage increases in Pennsylvania since 2009, right? And then now 16 years later, the minimum wage that they were fighting for is actually like it's too low because they've been fighting for it for so long. And this is not at all about, whether an organization has enough, grassroots support or whether they have enough capacity or anything like that. It's a comment about how difficult the legislature is to work with and how corrupt it is. So we kind of view wins in a different way, and always the organizing comes first. But I just want to emphasize, like, it's people work on stuff for decades at a time because of how corrupt the legislature is. Sorry, Michael, thank you.
Absolutely. And I'll just add one more thought. And again, and this is the underlying current of the entire class here for everybody, folks. We only win what we're organized to take. And so these fights take a long time. As our organizing grows, as our movement strength grows, we're able to do more and more and win bigger and bigger things. So yeah. And I'll pass it off to Nishmi.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Michael. Hi, everybody. Once again, Nijmi from Put People First PA, the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, and the PA Poor People's Campaign. Also work with the Homeless Union as well, National Union of the Homeless. So really appreciating all of that was just shared about the legislature, and again, just emphasizing this point that many groups, many labor unions, many different entities on the terrain have been fighting for changes for 15 or 20 years. And we don't say that to, sort of put everybody in a depressed kind of mood, but we say that to just have a really clear-eyed view of what we're up against and why, as Andrea said, we focus and think a lot about, out of all of these fights, are we building leaders? Are we building organization? Are we building permanently organized communities? Because this is, one of the things that is the victory. If we build from these fights, clear, competent, committed, and connected leaders. And yes, absolutely, pissed off. Thank you, Michael. Cool. So we're going to share a bit about what we've learned about the legislature. This is not comprehensive, and I'm sure that, again, there's a lot of experiences in the room that can be added to this in terms of what we've learned about the legislature, but we're going to share a few of our insights. So one, we understand that the reality for how our legislators see things, how our governor sees things, is this kind of idea, because again, our legislature and our political system is part of our economic system, right? And our economic system is one that puts profit over people. And so our political system upholds that, right? And so our legislators and our entire sort of structure at the state level sees itself as competing with other states for jobs and investment, which I think over time, right, we've seen and learned is really a race to the bottom, because it's a race to see how much tax breaks we can provide, right? How much we can, give to wealthy elite, corporations, Wall Street interests to come, right, to our state, to our place, and, make money here, right, by exploiting our labor, sort of damaging, in many cases, our environment. And we, our political system is structured to just sort of like line up to do that, to line up to do that, because that is the system. That's the overall system that we live in. We're also going to speak on the fact that many bills, we've actually done an analysis of bills, all the bills that were passed in the 2021-2022 session. And we found some really interesting things about them. And so I'll wait till we get to that slide to kind of say a little bit more about that. So we see that there's definitely sort of bipartisan support and service to Wall Street, to corporate interests. And there's a real reluctance to disrupt the status quo. And I think that what we've also seen is that when politicians do kind of move on something, they do it after they see this massive groundswell from below, right? And then they kind of get on board, right? And so this is what we also mean when we say that change comes from below. And I think that like a good example of the way that we can understand that our political system is a product, right, of our economic system, is that we're going to talk tonight about like the influence of money in politics and like the revolving door and campaign contributions and gifts and side jobs. We're going to talk about all of that. And I think there's even, a deeper reality, right? Which is like thinking about, for instance, one issue that I work a lot around being healthcare. Right now, there's hospital closures happening in Southeast PA, right? The Crozier system is threatened with closure. The Scranton Regional and Moses Taylor hospitals in Northeast PA are threatened with closure. We saw the closure of the Bradford Hospital in Northern Pennsylvania. We saw the recent closure of UPMC Cole in Potter County. All these hospitals are closing. And when you go to the legislators, they say, you know what? There's nothing we can do about that. Why? Because they can't intervene in private businesses changing hands or closing down their business, right? Like they don't have the ability. The law does not allow for them to intervene in that. And so again, right, like is it an upside down world, the fact that these hospitals are businesses essentially, and they can be declared to be shut down if they're not profitable? Yes, that's completely irrational. That is wrong. It's immoral, it's unjust, but it's also legal, right? And so these legislators actually can't do anything about that. I mean, they could do something by, taking Herculean steps to sort of change all of these laws to put in place other things. But currently, the law does not even allow them to interfere in the business transactions of the private equity, the Wall Street interests, the private interests who own these hospitals, right? And so it's deeper, right? Even than some of the stuff that we're going to get into today. And so I just wanted to say that, and we can go to the next one. Oh, yeah. And so speaking of this race to the bottom and kind of the perspective, this kind of false narrative about competing among states, which I want you to contrast with what we said earlier about how the PPC is a state-based movement and we are joining up across states, right? We're trying to connect that 140 million across these state boundaries. But our political leaders, because of the corporate structure, are not really seeing it that way. And so we're going to watch just a few minutes of Governor Shapiro's budget address from last year to kind of get a sense of this narrative.
Top of that foundation of educational excellence, that we will build an economy that is a leader in economic development, innovation, and job creation. I've made it clear, Pennsylvania is open for business. We hit the ground running with a bunch of wins. As a result of our direct engagement, we secured more than $1.2 billion in new private sector investment. EMD Electronics, a global semiconductor manufacturing company, is putting $300 million into Schuylkill County and building the largest specialty gas facility in the world. Purolite is investing $190 million in Chester County to create the first US-based manufacturing line for biotech and pharmaceutical products. And we convinced Excelitas, a leader in photonics technology, to relocate from Massachusetts to the Strip District in Pittsburgh. As a guy who absolutely hates the Boston Celtics, it gives me great pleasure to take this company out of Beantown and welcome them to Pennsylvania. Here in Pennsylvania, investment is up and unemployment is down. We have sped up government, cut down processing times, eliminated backlogs, and we have slashed red tape. Last year, Pennsylvania issued 249,000 of the same type of business license for companies, big and small. The day I took office, it took 8 weeks to get one of those licenses. Today, it takes less than 3 days. We are moving at the speed of business. But gang, we can't stop here because I want us to be the best. That's why last week I announced that Pennsylvania now has a comprehensive economic development strategy for the first time in nearly 2 decades. This plan focuses our attention, our resources on 5 sectors where we're poised to compete and win: agriculture, energy, life sciences, manufacturing, and robotics and technology. We've got a strategy to deploy different tools and approaches to lift up each one of them. But in order to execute this plan, in order to compete, we need to invest. Consider this. Over the last 5 years, our neighbors, Ohio, New York, and New Jersey, all committed more resources to economic development than Pennsylvania did. Ohio has 1.5 million fewer people than Pennsylvania, yet they invested over 7 times more in economic development than we have. And you know what? Let's be frank. Their investment is paying off. And I am sick and tired of losing to friggin' Ohio. We need to catch up right now.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Nick, for sharing that. And so I just wanted to, share that because we should understand this kind of thinking. We talk a lot in the Poor People's Campaign about distorted moral narratives. And I would say that is a distorted narrative, right? This idea that, we are competing with these other places. I mean, that's not true. That's not in the interest of the working class, right? The working class of Pennsylvania is not the enemy of the working class of Boston or Massachusetts, is not the enemy of the working class of Ohio, right? We share a border with Ohio. We want to be working directly with people in Ohio to build our movement. So this is not our perspective. This is not our narrative. And we have to be able to see this kind of thing and understand it and kind of pick it apart, right? And even though the whole legislature across party lines is sitting there and clapping for that narrative, we have to understand what is that real narrative, what is that narrative really about? And is it really in, our interests as the working class? And we don't believe that it is. Because, he can talk about all the things that they've done to make the state more attractive for Wall Street, but they haven't raised the minimum wage. They haven't restored the adult dental benefit in Medicaid. They haven't kept these hospitals from closing, or all of these other things, right, that are actually really in our interests, right? They're really things that we actually need, So I just wanted to share that. And I think it's really important to kind of study these things. And so keeping going, I want to just reference something I said before and was mentioned before. We actually undertook a study, a grassroots study, a people-powered study. We asked for some help with this. We went to some different places and think tanks and institutes and said, we want to do an analysis of all the bills that were passed in the PA legislature in 2021 and 2022 session. And all of those entities were like, no, we're not going to do that. And so we decided to just do it ourselves, because we believe that working class people can think for ourselves, right? And we can do for ourselves. We're not helpless. We need power and not pity. And so we undertook with a few folks actually across states, this analysis of the bills, of the 161, I think, bills approximately that were passed in the General Assembly in the 2021-2022 legislative session. And we found some of the following things: that a large percentage of legislation passed by the legislature is just sort of changing language, naming bridges, rewriting business guidelines. That the legislature focuses on a lot of minutia, a lot of really small things, and maintaining the status quo, but likes to make it seem like they're doing things. But when you really look at what those things are, you realize that they're not very significant. They certainly don't take any of the profits away from Wall Street. They don't cut into the profiteering that is happening in our system. They don't give more power to everyday people and to working class people. When they do take bold, decisive action, it's often masked inside of large, hard to understand bills, and it primarily benefits Wall Street interests. And we actually, in looking at all of those bills and coming up with kind of like what is the whole pie, we saw that over 81% of bills were either neutral, irrelevant, or hurtful to the working class. And only about 18% of bills could be said to help. But even those 18% made very, very small incremental changes that weren't significant, right, in changing our material conditions. So that was our analysis. And I know that Andrea also put in the chat the link to the study on our website, which is awesome. And there's also a bit link in the slide, and we can send that out as a follow-up so people can look at that. You can read the study, and you can also look at the data behind it, which is included in a link, the breakdown of all of these bills. And I will pass it on to Rabbi Michael.
Hello, everybody, again. Thank you, Nishmi. So our economy, the corporate structure is very authoritarian and anti-democratic, right? You have a small number of people at the top who make all the decisions on behalf of everybody else, on behalf of the workers. And the legislature, as a functioning body, as a tool of the corporate class, is also similarly structured in a very authoritarian, anti-democratic way. There are a small number of people who control the decisions that are made inside of our legislature. Before, we talked about the 4 votes and 1 governor's signature that it takes to pass a bill into law. And those 4 votes in the legislature are controlled by a small number of people, 4 to 6 people, depending on the bill itself. So these are the top 4 leaders in the state legislature. Matt Bradford is the House Majority Leader. Joanna McClinton is the Speaker of the House. Joe Pittman is the Senate Majority Leader. Kim Ward is the Senate President. If any of these 4 object to a bill, it's dead. If the gatekeepers say no, if the top of the authoritarian pyramid says no, they have the ability to kill bills. So they hold a very tight grip on power, a very tight grip on the authority and the decision making within the legislature itself. So what makes these leaders so powerful, and how do they get these leadership positions? Yes, there are 2 senator wards. Senator Kim Ward, the one in Westmoreland County, is the Senate president. Thank you, Arlie. So leadership become leaders essentially by having access to money. Money in politics is a mechanism of control that the corporate class uses to control and make subservient our elected officials, the state legislature in this case. So they use money in politics to buy power. You can transform money into public power in our society. Money is speech. According to the Supreme Court, it's power. So to become a leader, to become a Speaker of the House or a Majority Leader, you have to be really good at raising money. You have to be friends with lobbyists and their donors. You have to be well liked by billionaires, and they'll give you campaign money. You can then use that campaign money to buy the votes of your colleagues and buy yourself a leadership position. So if you look at the campaign contribution records of all the leaders, they're doling out money through the party or directly to their colleagues. They're buying power. They can also withhold that money, which can hurt you. Leadership are also able to gerrymander. They control the maps. They control the district maps. And so they can change the boundaries of somebody's district. Leadership themselves are often in very safe districts, meaning they're not competitive. They don't face competition. And by the way, 91% of our legislators are in safe districts. 91% of our state legislature elections are non-competitive. Leadership also control dark money. They can call in big dark money attacks, or they can call in dark money to support you. And dark money is money that exists in the shadows. We don't know where it comes from. It often goes through super PACs or 501c4s. You may know those. I've heard those terms before. And it shows up usually as those endless ads on TV, on the radio, on YouTube that are just full of lies. It often turns into mailers that show up in your mailbox that are just full of lies and nonsense. So leadership can direct that money through their friends, the donors. They also, leadership, really control what gets a vote. They are in control of kind of what bills will get votes, and they really enforce their will on the rank and file, the rest of the legislators. They tell them how to vote. And if you vote out of line, you're going to get in trouble. And being in trouble means you might get drawn out of your district, you might get gerrymandered out of your district, you might lose your campaign money, you might get attacked anonymously without even knowing where it's coming from through dark money. And then also these other things in point 5 here, they can just take your office furniture. It's something that happens where if you piss off, if you anger the leadership, they'll just take your office furniture away from you. It's theirs. They can do the same thing with your office staff. One time when March on Harrisburg was pushing a gift ban bill, and we were demanding that certain legislators show a lot of courage on the House floor to force a vote. A couple legislators told us that they can't anger leadership because they're going to lose their staff. One person even went as far as saying, "My secretary just had a kid. She'll lose her job and her health care, and her whole life will be thrown upside down. Can't do it." Leadership will kick you off of committees. They'll say, you don't get to work on the bills that you care about. They'll also just kill any bill that you care about at all. They'll take any language that you have and just make sure it never finds its way across the finish line. And they really, and we mean this last line here, they will kill your hopes and dreams. This is a direct quote from a representative who came to Harrisburg with big hopes and then turned his back on a big lobbyist and was punished by the leadership with his bills will never pass. And this is, of course, to follow up what Andrea is writing in the chat here, right? This is not to deflect blame from the rank and file, but just to understand the harsh authoritarian nature of the state legislature itself. The very, very vindictive, punitive, petty, and domineering nature of within the state legislature itself, which we have to understand in order to interact with it. Let's keep going. Okay, so what are these methods of corruption? How does money get into politics? How does the ruling class pay with money and things of value our elected officials to work on behalf of private business, on behalf of private special interests? We're going to run through these very quickly. We have unlimited gifts in Pennsylvania. You can give any gift to any state level public official. Campaign contributions, unlimited. Side jobs, unlimited. Revolving door, functionally unlimited. Dark money, unlimited. And we're going to go into each of these. Pennsylvania, any gift is legal. This includes sports tickets, concert tickets, vacations to the Bahamas. This includes wining and dining, surf and turf meals. It is ridiculous. There are legislators who refer to themselves as Second Street warriors, meaning they go out on Second Street and get wined and dined and bribed by lobbyists like nobody's business. You can eat a whole day's worth of meals in Harrisburg on a session day just on the lobbyist dime. Breakfast, brunch, lunch, drinks, dinner, drinks. It's all happening all the time. It's a culture of corruption with unlimited gifts. Campaign contributions. It costs money to run for office. That money has to come from somewhere. And that's often from people who have a lot of money, very rich people. And they often want things. And they use campaign contributions as a way of getting you to agree with them and their interests. It's a bribe, right? It's a function of bribery. I'm sorry, wait, go back, Nick, really fast. So this is just the price that it costs to win an office. This is what you need to fundraise, conventionally speaking, to win an office, all the way from state rep, tens of thousands to millions, to the White House, which costs billions of dollars. And that money comes with strings attached. And we have no limits in Pennsylvania on campaign contributions. The revolving door, future job offers. That's what this means. It's future job offers. It's a stated understanding in Harrisburg, just as it is in Washington, D.C., and many other places around the country, that once you're done being a public official, once you're done being a state legislator, you have a nice job waiting for you as a lobbyist. Whether you're working in the Wolf administration, like his acting health secretary who became a lobbyist for UPMC, or you're the former Senate president who just opened up his his own lobbying firm along with another former Senate president, or you're the governor's former chief of staff who now lobbies for Amazon, right? It's just a constantly spinning revolving door where people are working for their next job. They're working for their job as a lobbyist. It's a way of control, and it's a really brutally effective means of enforcing corporate ruling class discipline on legislators. Side jobs. You don't have to wait in order to get a job on the side that pays well. As a full-time legislator with a decent salary and good benefits, as we've already discussed, you're allowed to also work a side job. And those side jobs often have blatant conflicts of interest, and the public, we don't know how much they actually get paid for these jobs. They don't have to tell us what they're actually getting paid. Some of these side jobs include, that's our former Senate President, Jake Corman. He was on the board of a bank. He was a Wall Street banker while he was Senate President in charge of our state's budget and finances. Our former Speaker of the House was also working a side job at a powerhouse law firm that represents Fortune 500 corporations. Top right refers to Senator Gene Yaw. He is the chair of the Senate Energy and Environmental Committee. Every bill that has to do with energy or the environment passes through Gene Yaw. As the committee chair, he is a gatekeeper. He is one of the leaders. And he is also a practicing attorney for gas companies. We pay him a paycheck as the people to be the senator in charge of energy and environment, and a law firm also pays him a salary for him to work for gas companies. And dark money, it's untraceable. We don't know where it comes from. Again, it often shows up as those nasty mailers, those nasty ads. It is a cloak and dagger attack, and it is brutal. In this last election, the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, spent $300 million, most of it in dark money. And frankly, we only know about it because he wanted us to know about it. And who knows what else he spent. But there's billions of dollars of dark money swirling through our system, and it causes devastation. It's divide and conquer. It just turns people against each other with lies and hate your neighbor kind of rhetoric. Okay, so we're going to be going into breakout rooms in a second. I just want to make sure that all the faith leaders have changed their name to faith leader dash your name so that Nick can definitely put them all in, put all of us into the same room together. We're going to be digesting some information and discussing some things in our breakout rooms. Sorry, one more thing before we go in. Yeah, I just want to round out that last section by saying, by kind of reiterating the main point that our state legislature as it functions now, right? It's a tool of the ruling class. It is owned and operated by the corporate ruling class for the benefit of maximizing their own profit and their own power. The state is a tool in whoever's hands wields it. And right now, the ruling class has control of it. And democracy insists that we take control of it, that it actually be responsive to the working class, to the people, to the masses. And so that's the challenge. That's part of the challenge.
And I can whisk folks away any moment. All that I was just going to say is there might be a couple folks who I know joined in or popped off and joined back in. I'll definitely add you into a room, but I will open the rooms. You'll be whisked away for some good conversation. Welcoming folks back into the main room. Hope everyone had some good conversation, good thought, good reflection with others.
Welcome back, everybody. I know we had a very deep, very heartfelt discussion in my group. And I'm sure that that is true across the board. We have a couple of minutes here. Would love to invite a couple facilitators to share a point from your group that you want to collectivize and bring to the whole group. So any facilitators want to share a point?
In our group, we talked a little bit about how, it's surprising that the members don't want to change the system as it is. But then we talked about how, the system's designed this way and it's very hard to change because if you try to buck the system, you will get pushed out. But we also talked somewhat about how, the thing that's going to change the system is going to be public pressure. They're not going to change because they want to. They're only going to change if they feel that the public would turn against them and vote them out of office. That's the only thing that would motivate them. And that goes back to our discussion previously about how the power comes from us, not from above.
Thank you, Jeff.
I can briefly touch on what we talked about on our group. I think when I was listening to everyone share, I thought a lot about something that was mentioned on the beginning about things that are funded on a federal level, but are administered on a state level, administered, because we have had a lot of folks in our group who are receiving benefits or are part of the social service network of helping to uplift people and use those social benefits. And it's kind of this weird situation where you are depending on this large federal structure to maintain things that are so integral to your local communities. While at the same time, someone mentioned that our state legislature is designed to put us in competition with other states in a way that kind of reduces the benefits to our local communities. And so it feels like the structure is one giant monster while we're trying to make it work on a community level.
Thanks, Arlie.
I can share a small one point that we talked about, which is how that budget address, that video of Shapiro just really fired us up. And I think it just gave us a lot of clarity of the system. It became clear who his audience was in that budget address, right? He wasn't talking to the people, right? He's talking to fellow legislators that are entrenched in this system, but also donors and billionaires and the ruling class and anyone but the people. And, we also talked a little bit about how change outside the ballot box is really important and how, tons of people don't vote because they don't feel represented and how our organizing is so important and how political independence is key. Those are the kind of the main things that we talked about.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, and I know that we talked in our group about, I think there's a real thirst for going deeper into how we organize to really fight back and just showing the powerful work of the campaign, the organizations in the campaign, and really deepening our understanding of what does it mean to build organization and to build leaders. Because I do think that this is some of what we're putting forward as the antidote, to what we're seeing here, right? And to the force that will be powerful and capable of putting us on a path to fundamental change. But, many of us may not have experienced that or know what that looks like. And so I think there's a real thirst for looking more deeply into that. So really appreciating this. Thank you all for these conversations. I feel like this is such an amazing group of people that's coming together. And I want to say, thank you to everyone here, right? Like, thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for all of the work that you have done, in your life to make the world a better place and elevate the human condition. And so I want to pull up the slides very briefly just to show kind of our next steps. Thank you so much, Nick. So first of all, we have organizations that folks can become involved in. And so many people were asking this question of like, what do I do, right? We have organizations like the ones here. Put People First PA is focusing on healthcare. The Movement of Immigrant Leaders of PA focusing on immigrant rights. The Debt Collective on debt cancellation. March on Harrisburg. Money in Politics, Democracy, UU Justice PA, the minimum wage, and other things. We've also got Pennsylvania Action on Climate. I know there were some, someone in my group was part of PAC, and that's another group that is fighting for, environmental justice to end environmental devastation. So there are ways to get involved. Yes, the Homeless Union, and we will continue to raise this and get people connected and kind of give people a little chance to see, where are you resonating? Where do you want to get involved? There's also, Nick, you can go ahead and share. I believe that we have talked about our working groups as well. Our faith leaders team. We have a communications and social media team, a base building team, arts and culture, our legislative team. So there's ways to get involved specifically with the PA Poor People's Campaign. And then there's also a way to become a mobilizing partner with the campaign, right? And so we know that some people here are already part of organizations. That's fantastic. We want to link up and connect with you and partner with you, right, in the work of the campaign and this broader movement. And so there's a form that Andrea just put in the chat. Thank you so much, Andrea. Put a form for working groups, but also put a form for mobilizing partners. And we will also send that out as a follow-up to the session tonight too. So we hope that there are some avenues, right, for folks to take next steps, to get involved. We will continue to lift these up. We'll continue to follow up and see, where do you want to go next? And there's a lot of different possibilities and avenues for that. You don't have to decide tonight, but as we go along, we hope that you will. So in a week's time, on Monday, March 17th, we will start getting into how we research power holders. And so we're going to start to build our skills to really figure out, right, how to maneuver on this terrain, how to build leaders, how to build our leadership, how to use these tactics to build our organizations, to consolidate our people, and researching and understanding more about these folks is something that gives us, knowledge in then interacting with them. And so, yeah, who's all excited to join us next week as we talk about researching power holders? Put up a little emoji, raise your hand, put something in the chat. Fantastic. Okay, so I know it's been an intense night, a night of a lot of thinking and questioning and things that are good, right? Things that I think ultimately lead to a lot of growth. We really appreciate all of you being here with us. And so we'll just come off mute and we'll do a forward together, not one step back. So everybody get a chance to come off mute. And I will say forward together and you say not one step back. Forward together.
Not
One step back.
Forward together.
Not
One step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
everybody.
Be well.
night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.